Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to another edition of the GYSM's One Pulse HD. The GYSM, the Guyanese Youth and Student Movement, of course, is the youth arm of the People's National Congress Reform. My name is Ryan Belgrave, and I would like to invite you to stay with us for the next 27 minutes or so as we discuss this afternoon, as usual, issues that are of importance and relevance to the development of the Guyanese population. As always, today we will focus on such issues, and this afternoon, more specifically, we're going to be focusing on issues that are specific to the development of the Guyanese youth. With me this afternoon in studio is none other than a man of many titles that basically needs no introduction. He's the leader of the parliamentary majority, leader of a partnership for national unity, and leader of the People's National Congress Reform. I'd like you to welcome Mr. David Arthur Granger. We discussed this afternoon issues on the development of the youth in Guyana. Welcome again, Mr. Granger.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And Happy New Year to you.
Yes, same to you, sir. Many happy, cake and black cake and pepper pot and those sorts of things. As I said before, this afternoon we will be discussing issues that are specific to the development of the Guyanese youth. Now, welcome again, Mr. Granger. In your New Year address, or your address to the nation on New Year's Day, you focused largely on young people in Guyana. What's even more interesting is the fact that you dubbed 2011, or 2013 rather, as the year of youth, year for youth. Can you provide clarity for the sake of the viewing population or viewers out there as to what exactly this year for youth entails?
Well, Ryan, we were all very disappointed when it was an international year for youth. It was virtually ignored by the People's Progressive Party civic administration in this country. It was only in the last few days of the international year that we had a demonstration in the streets of Georgetown. Then we had a symposium of some sort at the International Conference Center organized by the People's Progressive Party civic administration. But I think throughout that international year for youth, there was hardly any activity that could have been said to have focus on young people. But my declaration of the year 2013 as the International Year for Youth, or the National Year for Youth, has nothing to do with the failures of the PPP. It has everything to do with our vision in the People's National Congress Reform for young people. In fact, attention to young people is not an option, it's obligatory. We have an obligation to ensure that young people are prepared for leadership positions in the country. And this is why we intend to focus in 2013 on young people. We feel that youth are in a crisis now in Guyana from several points of view. And it is quite clear to us that the PPP administration, after 20 years, has got no national youth policy. And it is quite clear that the absence of a national youth policy is adversely affecting the development of young people and their preparation for citizenship.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for that. So how do you intend to use your portfolio as the leader of the parliamentary majority to ensure that emphasis or a lot of significant emphasis is given to young people in this 2013 year for youth?
Well, there are three main areas that I would like to mention, Ryan. Bearing in mind that much of my knowledge or experience has come about by practical interaction with young people in the 10 regions of this country. I've actually been out there and I've spoken with them, I've met them, I've seen their condition. So I would like to feel that I speak from a position not of theory, but of practical exposure to a situation out there. I think the biggest problem facing young people in Guyana today is the crisis in education. You yourself are a teacher, and I'm sure you're aware that there is a very serious situation in education in terms of, first of all, the number of dropouts. I think that's the most noticeable aspect of education collapse in Guyana. By my calculation, there's one dropout of a boy or girl from primary or secondary school in Guyana every hour. So in 24 hours, there'll be 24 dropouts. It's as bad as that. And many of the people who drop out of primary school and secondary school are not fully literate, they're not fully numerate. This creates a second problem, what I call a knock-on problem. That is a problem of unemployment. Many young people leaving school are unemployed. Number one, of course, is the fact that the economy, although you may say the macroeconomic indicators are sound, that is, the GDP and other strategic economic factors are in place. In fact, there is growing poverty and there is a growing gap between the very rich and the very poor. So although the country might be earning more because of gold, that wealth is not trickling down to the ordinary people. So we have a situation in which the economy as a whole is not growing. It is not providing jobs for young people, and a lot of young people coming out are unemployed, and this causes other problems in the communities. So that's the second problem, employment. The third problem, of course, is empowerment. That we speak about youth being the leaders of tomorrow. Oh, of course they're the leaders tomorrow. Old people can't remain where they are forever. They have to hand over. And we might as well hand over to young people who are prepared to assume and accept their responsibilities as citizens. To do this, there must be some process of empowerment. And we need to ensure that young people are given the opportunity to participate in managing organizations and clubs. They must be able to have their voices heard, their interests articulated in the communities in which they live. They must be given leadership positions. They must become apprentices so that they can grow up in organizations and learn to manage those organizations. So gradually there's a process of empowerment. From the time you leave, or from the time you're in school, you learn to manage sport clubs, you learn to manage sporting teams, you go on excursions, you go to expeditions, sporting visits to other countries, and gradually you become more confident in your ability to manage. So those are the three main areas: education, employment, and empowerment of young people.
Okay, in addressing those three areas that you've mentioned, education, employment, empowerment, how would a partnership for national unity exert its influence in the National Assembly to ensure that these things are no longer put on the back burners and they are addressed adequately by the incumbent?
Well, although we're the majority, we're not the government. Although there is a government, it is not a majority. We have to ensure that we use every legitimate measure under the Constitution to bring these three matters, particularly involving youth, to bear. For example, we can make a demand that there be a national youth policy. In fact, one of the MPs from our party, Ms. Selman, I think 2 years ago in the 9th Parliament, made a demand of the Minister of Sport, Culture, Youth and Sport, Frank Anthony. He's still the same Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. He promised to introduce a national youth policy. His permanent secretary said that a consultant would be engaged to produce or to draft a national youth policy. Still, there's no national youth policy. So we will be able to use our majority, first of all, in the field of education. Since we cannot bring financial bills before the National Assembly, we will be able to ask questions, we'll be able to move motions and resolutions in the National Assembly and demand that certain improvements be put in place to improve the education sector. One of the biggest problems in education is the teacher problem. And many of our teachers are unqualified or untrained. Some of them go to Cyril Potter College of Education, and they receive a paltry allowance of only $7,700 or something a month. It is inadequate. Many teachers are sent out of the service for all sorts of disciplinary reasons. And there's a teacher shortage in many of the Amerindian areas particularly, and I'm sure in the coastland areas, there is a massive teacher shortage because teachers tend to migrate to countries where they could be better paid. We're advocating that the teacher problem be resolved at Cyril Potter College of Education particularly, and at the University of Guyana, so that we have a better quality of teacher, we have a better remunerated teacher, that the teacher is allowed to teach beyond the age of 55. However, if he or she wants to teach until she's 60 or 65, why not? We need teachers, we need quality teachers. Better pay. I promise one laptop a teacher, Give the teachers what they need. My favorite saying is taken from Mrs. Olga Bone, who was a well-known teacher some years ago. She said that if children cannot learn the way they're taught, teach them the way they can learn. And similarly, I would say if the education problems are not being solved the way that they're being approached at present by this administration, approach education problems the way they can be solved. And if the solution is in paying teachers better, we want to see more teachers remaining longer in our classrooms, producing a higher quality of students. So the education problem, in the National Assembly, we are going to continue to exert pressure on the Minister of Education to improve the conditions for teachers, to improve the conditions at Silpata College of Education, to improve the conditions of children in schools, both in the coastline and in the hinterland. I think that's the most important thing. As far as the second item is concerned, the employment, I think that is going to be a little more difficult because the economy simply has not expanded. Even though the government, the Minister of Finance, the President like to boast about growth, there is growth, but there's no development. There's a larger pie in the sense that, yes, the GDP has increased, but we are not creating jobs. We're not developing a greater percentage of the population. If young people are going to be employed, we need, first of all, to set up programs which will deal with the large surplus of students who've come out of schools and cannot find jobs. We need, in the past we had something called the National Service, but we need programs in which young people could be trained for the world of work. It is no point giving children one type of education when they go back into the regions, particularly the hinterland regions or agricultural or rural regions. They do not have the type of education which can give them employment in those regions. So if a person comes from a farming area, there must be emphasis on agricultural science, agri-science. If a person comes from an industrial or manufacturing area, there must be emphasis on a different range of subjects. And we need to look at our education system to ensure that it gives the students the type of education which could fit him or her into the particular environment in which he will have to live and work. So that we're looking for a more relevant education system to provide the type of employment, and in particular, we have recommended in the PNCR and in the GYSM that there be more emphasis on science, on technology, on engineering, and on mathematics, STEM. There's no point going over the same old curriculum, the same old syllabus, year after year, without giving young people the opportunity to embark on areas of study which are moving whole regions of this earth forward. We are now living in the new millennium. We're living in an era of technological progress. But when you visit some of the schools, even on the coastline, there are no laboratories. And that is one of the reasons why we said, look, from the first day a student teacher goes into Silpata College of Education, he or she must be given a laptop, because it's the age of information. You need, just like you needed blackboard and chalk 100 years ago, you need laptops now. When I go to Freedom Hoop Secondary School, when I go to Panamakatoy or Port Kaitchum or St. Ignatius or Aishalton Secondary School, I want to see functioning laboratories, not just information technology laboratories, but biology laboratories, botany laboratories, chemical laboratories, physics laboratories, so that Guyana starts to produce scientists, engineers, technicians. When I go to the Rupununi, the largest region in Guyana, bigger than Costa Rica, there's not a single highway. Most of the bridges are made of wood. So sometimes there's a savanna fire, the bridges could get burned. I've seen trucks falling off of wooden bridges in Rupununi in 2012. What we need are scientists who can go about the development of this country. Where do those scientists come from? The school system. So the two go together, education and employment. We need to have more employment. But at the same time, we're not training our students in the and we're not educating students in our primary and secondary schools to go into the world of work, particularly in the areas of greatest need.
Okay, education and employment. And the third would be empowerment.
Empowerment.
And if I can recall, back in the 1950s, 1960s, I wasn't there, so not a recollection in that regard.
I might find difficulty remembering myself.
But the persons that were the architects of Guyana's independence and Guyana's development in those days, those were young people. And now we have the system where, because of a consistency of being marginalized and rejected or left out of the decision-making process of this country, young people find it hard to integrate into any program of development, etc. And they prefer to just sit on the sideline and wait on somebody to get it done for them. What are your thoughts on that with reference to the whole issue of empowerment?
Well, empowerment is a woolly term, but there are several aspects to it. Number one, I do believe that the absence of this national youth policy is one of the greatest crimes that has been committed against young people, because there is obviously no clear guideline as to what should be done. I would say, for example, in the schools, there must be clubs, both sporting clubs and maybe academic or semi-academic clubs, so that young people are given the opportunity to captain, lead teams on the sporting field. They're given the opportunity to visit neighboring countries in Suriname, Brazil, Venezuela, Trinidad, and the Caribbean, to lead and participate in sport team, to meet other people. They must be given the opportunity to manage complex activities in their schools or out of schools. For example, in the Guyana Youth and Student Movement, people could be elected to positions, chairman, secretary, and so on, and they learn to manage meetings, they learn to manage money, they learn to manage their colleagues, they learn to plan, they learn to anticipate. So these are some aspects of empowerment. For example, there's a National Youth Parliament, and the government itself has set up some enterprises like the President Youth Choice Initiative or the President Youth Award Republic of Guyana. But there's no evidence that these organizations, PYCI or PYARG, are really empowering young people, encouraging them to make decisions, encouraging them to manage enterprises, encouraging them to become good citizens. So it is, I have to keep referring to all three because you have to take a holistic approach.
Yes, definitely.
So it's not just education alone, just book learning. It's not just employment alone, getting a job when you leave school. It's not just empowerment alone, but all three must come together to create a rounded young person, a rounded citizen.
Okay, just again to give focus to the National Youth Policy, we're dealing with an administration that turns almost all serious issues into a matter of song and dance. So how or what will influence or impact the development of this policy? Who basically provides the information for the guideline to guide the architects of this policy?
We in the majority are now going to, as I've declared on the 1st of January, in my New Year broadcast, we will take the initiative because it's quite clear the government has no interest in doing so. I mean, they've been here for 20 years, and Dr. Frank Anthony is still talking about drafting and bringing in. You don't need to bring in a consultant. Trinidad has a policy. Every country in the world has a proper youth policy. We seem to be, dependent on consultants. So the opposition in the National Assembly will take the initiative, and we will submit a draft policy if the government is scared of doing so. And once it is passed, we are going to ensure that it is implemented by demanding that funds be provided for a national youth policy. But we cannot continue waiting on the government. The horse is starving while the grass is growing. And we know the situation. Look, I've gone to so many communities over the last 2 years or so. From Mabaruma in the north right down to Aishata. Every single community has lots and lots of unemployed young people. And the government is not providing employment opportunities for young people. part of it is because of the absence of that national youth policy. And we feel that if we take the initiative in the National Assembly, and we will take the initiative, the Partnership for National Unity will take the initiative to submit a draft national youth policy to the Parliament. And if the government does not produce something that we are in agreement with, we will pass our own national youth policy. But we want to make sure that the education given to our young people is rectified. We want to make sure that jobs are available, and we want to make sure there are measures for empowerment. For example, something like the Youth Parliament. Nobody knows about it. I went to Jamaica a few months ago to attend the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association meeting. And the persons who were sent there to represent youth, one was the child of a minister of the government, and the other was an employee of the government in the office of the president. Those were the two youth representatives, both within the framework of the PPP administration. They're not. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm saying that there seems to be no objective criterion for selecting those persons. I mean, they might be quite nice people, but we need to be a little more democratic in the way we go about these matters. So if we had a national youth parliament where children, young people from all 10 regions could be given opportunity to participate, we will see that empowerment taking place. We will see that welling up of goodwill from among young people who want to get involved. But it's not happening now.
All right. In 2006, the PNCR campaigned with YES, the Youth Empowerment Scheme. And that, of course, had a concise document as to somewhat of a youth policy with reference to what can be done to empower, educate, and ensure employment for young people. How can a policy such as that, or the YES scheme, be used in, let's say, this year for the year of youth? How can we use the information from that policy?
Why YES, you call it YES, okay, was introduced as part of our manifesto in 2006. The PPP got infatuated with the idea, and they created something called YEST. Of course, the PNC 1G, as it was called in the People's National Congress Reform 1 Guyana, did not get into government, so it was not able to implement that YES. And the PPP took the YEST and virtually transformed it into a training program called the National Training Program for Youth Empowerment. It was first called YEST, and I think it still exists on paper as YEST. But it is very hard, of course, for a party that is not in government to mount a national program. But what it did contain were the elements of empowerment, the elements of skills training, the elements. There was even recommendation for the reintroduction of national service, a national employment service. So taken as a whole, the YES did point in the right direction. I've looked at it again, and there might be some modifications. There must be greater emphasis on education, because over the last 5 years, 6 years now, since YES was promulgated, the education system has slipped further. I mean, there are thousands more dropouts. I mean, I've been into some remedial classes on the East Coast, Demerara, and a 16-year-old being taught to spell bat and cat and dog. It's as bad as that. So literacy is a big problem. So YES is now being revised by our team in the PNCR, and it will incorporate those three elements, education, employment, and empowerment. So there's a lot that is there now, but it was envisaged to, as an enterprise or a project to be implemented by a government, and we're not yet the government. So we will now have to use our majority to make the government obliged to improve the condition of young people.
All right. Looking more recently, after the 2011 elections, we saw that there was a group of young people that had this flame or this passion in which they were saying that we're fed up with business as usual. How do you see that movement in terms of youth empowerment, young people, and what are your thoughts on that movement, where young people got up and took the mantle and decided that this is how things, or this is how we can help to impact change?
Well, Ryan, that was one of the most refreshing, I would say electrifying experiences of the campaign. Many people used to write off the young people. Oh, all they want is shows, they want sport, they want, you know, these foreign artists. They felt that the shift in young people's attention had moved from education to entertainment. I think 2011 proved them wrong, because from May 2011, in the People's National Congress Reform and the Guyana Youth and Student Movement, we had a youth convention. And the energy that young people embarked in the campaign was phenomenal, and I think it contributed measurably to a very favorable outcome. Certainly, the young people are not apathetic, they're not disengaged, and they're not, you know, non-political. They're very concerned about their future. They're very concerned with what we had to say. I remember going up to the University of Guyana as one of the so-called presidential debates, and the atmosphere was thick with excitement. People wanted to see where their political leaders would take them forward, and certainly a Partnership for National Unity came out of that debate with flying colors, because we had a very positive program for the university. We had a positive program for education. We had a positive program for young people. Where are we going now? I feel that young people need to take that step forward. They should not be complacent, they should not relax, they should not feel that the older folk are going to simply look after them. There is much to be achieved in 2013 in all fields. For example, I learned a lot about what's going on at St. Potter College in Education from the students. Letters to the editor, people who called me, people who wrote to state, well, look, they just cannot function with $7,000 stipend. There's now something called the Associate Degree in Education. And people are writing letters. Young people are speaking up. And that is what I want to hear from young people. They have a voice, they have interests, and they must be able to articulate those interests. That is what I call empowerment. We would never have known about the rot in CPC in the education system if the young people themselves did not come out and say, look, we need better education, better prospects for employment, better opportunities for empowerment. So I see that 2011, that election campaign was a turning point, and people can no longer hang their head and say, oh, these young people, all they want is to dance and party. These young people want good education, they want good employment, and they want to have a good life. And that's what APNU and PNCR promised them.
Okay, in closing, what are your, or what closing remarks would you leave with the young people with reference to the Year for Youth, and in general, how they can help to craft a good life for themselves?
I would like to feel that Year for Youth means exactly what we said it should mean, that people should step forward. I'm not necessarily saying they must go in a political party, but what I'm saying is wherever they are, in their communities, in the 10 regions, in their clubs, in their sporting teams, they should stand up and make their voices heard. We in the National Assembly want to know what the interests of young people are. We don't want to tell young people what we want them to think. We want the young people to tell us what they want. And we are going to use this opportunity this year, and we want young people to step forward. Let them meet in their communities, wherever they are, in Ithaca, in Port Morant, in Corriverton. Let them meet and say what they feel about PYCI, say what they feel about PYARG, the President Youth Award, Republic of Guyana, say what they feel about the National Training Program for Youth Empowerment. Demand jobs, let them march, let them make life uncomfortable for the powers that be. That is what I want to see. The Year for Youth must be a year in which the administration of this country devotes its attention and its financial resources to the improvement of young people. That is what I want to see. And when we sit together here, Ryan, in January 2014, I want young people to say, that was great, that was a year for young people.
All right, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this afternoon, Mr. Granger, on the Year for Youth, in addition to issues of relevance to the development of young people in Guyana. And thank you again, viewers, for staying with us for the last 30 minutes or so as we spoke on issues relevant to youth in Guyana. Do join the GYSM on Saturday from 12:30 to 1 p.m. as we have another edition of One Pulse. And next Wednesday from 5:30 to 6 p.m. right here on HBTV Channel 9. Thank you and goodbye.
When it's hot, get cool with Frosty Novelty Ices.